Should Paul Skenes be ranked SP1 rest of season? We'll answer that, reveal our latest rankings movers, and much more up next on a Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in polka. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aaron Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Mosu,
Happy Kokomo Friday and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on July 12th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Chris Towers. Today on the show, Paul Skenes is unstoppable. We have our latest prospect spotlight, rankings, risers, and fallers, and much more. But let's kick things off with the players of the night.
You better call your mama right now, sir.
That call comes courtesy of Bally Sports North. On the Twins TV broadcast the other night, they had Marnie Gellner call the game, the first woman to call play-by-play in Twins history, and she did a great job. That was her home run call for Trevor Larnach, so I did want to highlight that. A listener sent that in to me, so I was very happy to call that. First off, Chris, nice hat. We did not plan this at all. I don't know what the kids are calling. Is it the Philly massacre of the Dodgers? I don't know what's going on.
But... I mean, yeah, we're big Phillies fans here. You know, famously. Actually, you know, my Miami friends give my wife a lot of crap because since moving to New York, she adopted the Mets as her second team. But then with the Phillies making these deep postseason runs the last 2 years, she's really fallen in love with that lovable bunch of dudes. And so, like, now she has 3 favorite NL East teams, I guess.
She just loves the NL East. That's fine.
Yeah, it's great. You know, it's like all the people who chant SEC, except we're chanting NL East in our home.
There you go. Well, there's only one place to start, and that would be with Paul Skenes, who is unstoppable. He was at the Brewers. He threw 7 no-hit innings with 11 strikeouts to just 1 walk in this one. His second start of at least 6 no-hit innings. His second start with 11 strikeouts this season. How about this? The list of starting pitchers in the modern era to record multiple starts of at least 11 strikeouts and 0 hits in a single season. Paul Skenes and Nolan Ryan. There you go.
If you lower it to 10 strikeouts and no hits, only Max Scherzer joins the group. So it's not like it's much less impressive if you lower the bar there.
He is 11 starts into his career. Yeah. What is going on? Paul Skenes has gone 7 innings in 3 of his last 4 outings. He's allowed 3 earned runs or fewer in all 11 of his starts. He has 7+ strikeouts in 10 of 11 starts so far. And Chris, among starting pitchers with 60 innings so far, Skenes is first in K- walk rate, first in xFIP, first in Sierra, and he drops all the way down to 5th in FIP. So I'll throw it your way. You can react to the start. Obviously, an amazing one. I think there is a case to be made that Paul Skenes should be ranked as the SP1 rest of season. Not that we do that yet, but there is a case to be made for it.
I mean, look, he's SP5 for me. So it's not like there's that much room to grow there. The interesting thing about Skenes is, like, if you think of the counterfactual of, like, what would it look like if he hadn't added the splitter? And I'm just going to, like, I know we're doing the, like, splinker. It's a splitter. He just throws it hard. I understand it. Like,
and it sounds way cooler, Chris. Come on.
I think splinter sounds silly. That's my hot take. But, like, that has become, I mean, it's a pitch that he wasn't throwing before this spring. And it's become not just his best pitch, but one of the best pitches in baseball. It's the whiff rate is only okay, like 28 to 30%. It was 28% in this one, but guys just cannot get on top of this pitch. It has a -5 degree average launch angle for the season. And it's interesting to think of the counterfactual of what does Paul Skenes look like without that splitter, because, you know, he's awesome, but, like, the whiff rate on all the other pitches isn't all that impressive. It's just the quality of contact and the command especially have just been outrageously good for Paul Skenes. And so I don't know if I'm ready to say he should be the number 1 SP, but like the gap between him and Chris Sale, my number 4 SP, is not very big rest of season. I wonder if there's going to be some innings limitations at some point, if they're going to pull back on him, especially if they're not in the playoff race. So, I would take Chris Sale. I would take Tarek Skubal. I would take Corbin Burns. I would take Zach Wheeler. But like it's been a meteoric rise for Skenes. And if he keeps this up, I think he's absolutely in the SP1 conversation for next season. And honestly, at this point, I think he's probably pretty likely to be drafted as the SP1 for next season.
Yeah, just if you look at talent level, trajectory, right? People get so excited about prospects and young players who are ascending, and no one has ascended more, right? Like he was picked up as either drafted really late. Some people might have picked him up as a waiver wire pitcher and just kind of sat on him all season. And obviously what he's done has been nothing short of amazing. The Pirates are 2.5 games out of a wild card spot, so they are still competing. And I've read some rumors that they could actually add to the team, which is, I feel like, something they haven't done in forever. So if they're actually going for it, that obviously helps the chances of Paul Skenes sticking around for the rest of the season. But speaking of limitations here, Chris, did you have any thoughts? Because obviously a huge talking point today was him actually getting pulled after 7 no-hit innings after 99 pitches.
Yeah. Given that I think the 7th, he only threw 6 pitches, or maybe it was the 6th inning.
No, it was the 7th. Yep.
I probably would have let him go back out there, but it's easy for me to say sitting here, actually having to make that decision when, it's not just what Paul Skenes wants, but it's what the organization wants for him on his developmental path. That's an excruciatingly tough decision to make, because I would assume he hadn't thrown. Has he reached 100 pitches in a start before this?
I will look it up.
If he has, it's been by a slim margin. Obviously last year with LSU, he was throwing, 100 plus, I think 13 out of his 24 starts or something is what the number I saw. But
his last start before this, 107 pitches.
Okay. So like, I don't know. I can see both sides of it, right? Like he was not super efficient early on. I think it was like 67 pitches in the first 4 innings or something. And then he, really put it together the last 3. So I don't know. I can see both sides. I don't really have a strong take. It didn't seem like an obvious one to me either way. I probably would have let him stay out there, but I certainly understand.
Yeah. I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth as well, because I commend the Pirates, and I know a lot of people won't want to hear this, but if you have a process for a young pitcher, stick to it and be rigid. And that's exactly what they did. So they're sticking to their process, and that's it. And they've done that with Jared Jones, limiting him in certain starts as well. So I commend them for sticking to that here. The baseball fan in me absolutely hates it, right? Like you want to see a young kid go out and try and make history. So I see both sides, but I do commend the Pirates for having a plan and sticking to that plan in this start. All right, Paul Skenes is amazing. Chris, who else was amazing here on Thursday?
Hunter Greene, who, look, he had, arguably the easiest matchup in the game with the Rockies on the road, and he absolutely dominated. 10 strikeouts, 6 innings, 1 earned run, 2 hits allowed, 2 walks. The fastball and slider combo for Greene was outstanding. 4 whiffs on the 4-seamer, 13 with the slider. He barely threw the curveball and splitter in this one, only 3 total, but it's been a really, really interesting season for Hunter Greene, because I feel like a lot of people aren't buying into the gains that he's made. And maybe that makes sense, right? We've seen a dip in the strikeout rate after today. It's 27.6%. Last year, it was 30.5%. Walk rate, basically identical to where it's been the first 2 seasons. But the ERA, more than a run lower than it had been either of his first 2 seasons, because he's taken what was the biggest liability in his game and turned it into not just like something he can get by with, but actually a strength. His expected WOBA on contact entering today was 317. That's an elite mark for a starting pitcher. The average, 369. Last year, 384. If that's real, then this is not just like a, oh, Hunter Greene's gotten lucky on balls in play, or his home run per fly ball rate is half of what it was last year. That's going to regress. If this is real, this would represent legitimate growth in Hunter Greene as a pitcher. The problem is it's hard to know if that's real, right? Like that's the biggest thing. He's changed the pitch mix up a little bit, but it's going from throwing his changeup 5% of the time last year to the splitter and curveball 10% overall, which that's not nothing. And maybe that explains some of it, but mostly he's still a 2-pitch pitcher. And the 4-seamer is just working much, much better. His expected WOBA on the 4-seamer last year, 345. This year, 280. I mean, when you look at like the zone plots and how often he throws it in the middle of the zone versus past years, it doesn't seem that different. But hey, maybe it's just the threat of that splitter is making the 4-seamer play up a little more. I'm not sure exactly what it is. And I think skepticism is warranted given how noisy pitcher quality of contact is. But to say that if this is real, I think Hunter Greene is a legitimately much better pitcher than he was last season. And the thing that's been really interesting is he's going deep into games pretty consistently. It was a little rough in June, a couple starts with 5 innings or less, but it's been a lot of 6 1/3, 6 2/3, 7-inning starts this season in a way that I don't think we really expected from Greene. He's sort of turning into a little bit of a workhorse. And so, again, if the quality of contact is real, and there are reasons to be skeptical, but if it is, Hunter Greene might just be super underrated for fantasy and frankly, a borderline ace.
I wonder if there's something the Reds have done organizationally to get this quality of contact out of guys like Hunter Greene and Andrew Abbott.
Yeah.
Not that, look, Greene is better than Abbott, right? Just in terms of like pure stuff. And obviously, like you watch them pitch, Greene is better. But, you know, we've kind of poo-pooed Abbott all season long. And the one thing that we do come back to and say he's done a really good job of is limiting barrels and limiting hard contact this season. And the same thing with Hunter Greene. So it feels like there has been, whatever they've done, some kind of conscious change or just little tweak to maybe help those guys limit or get away from the barrel, because that was a problem for both of them last year. The one thing that still kind of gives me pause is just the command, because the walks could be a problem. I mean, it's 3.7 walks per 9. So obviously that number is really high. I mean, if we can get to a point where that's around 3, then that's when I think we start talking about, okay, we can have like a top 24 type starting pitcher here with Hunter Greene. A few shout outs. Oh my goodness gracious. Shout outs here from Thursday. Cal Raleigh is having a monster week. 3 for 4 with a double dong, 3 RBI, 3 runs, 4 RBI. He has multiple homers in 2 of his last 3 games. It does help facing the Angels, of course. He's already up to 36 fantasy points on the week, 19 home runs on the season, 59 RBI, 5 steals. Cal Raleigh has chipped in 5 steals. How about that? And of course, and oh my goodness gracious, shout out to the Phillies.
Our beloved Phillies.
Phillies, who just swept the Dodgers. Is there a name? Are they calling it something, Chris? Is it like the massacre? I don't know.
I have no idea.
I remember a couple of years ago, it was I don't remember which way it happened. Either the Yankees got swept in Boston or vice versa. And it was like the Boston massacre, blah, blah, blah. They made this whole big thing about it. Anyway, the Phillies are awesome. They're doing a great job. It's Friday. You know what that means. Another prospect spotlight. It's time to discuss some of the prospects who are catching our eye from a fantasy perspective, thanks to our sponsors at Hyundai, where they're thinking about every step of your journey out on the road. Let's talk about Cubs prospect Moises Ballesteros, who is a 20-year-old catcher built in a similar fashion to Alejandro Kirk.
I think you're going to say me.
No, I would not say that. Come on, Chris. But if you haven't seen highlights of this guy, go check it out, because very eerily similar body types to Alejandro Kirk. This season in the minors, 300 batting average with 10 home runs, 14 doubles, and 840 OPS between AA and AAA. And when you consider the age to level production, a 20-year-old catcher who is hitting this well at both AA and AAA, it's very impressive stuff. Chris, what do you think of the skill set and when we might see Ballesteros here in the majors?
Yeah, it's honestly not just a similar body plan to Alejandro Kirk, but the profile, like the statistical profile, is very similar. You're talking about a very contact oriented catcher hitter who, honestly, from everything I've read, is like a better defensive catcher than you would think. Not great, certainly, but someone who might be able to stick and actually, has enough functional athleticism to not be like a total zero back there. He stole 7 bases last season. But the bat is the primary draw here. It's 15-ish% strikeout rates at most levels, decent but not great power. It all sounds honestly very similar to Alejandro Kirk. And I think the question is, as we've seen with Kirk, is how sustainable can this be? One thing when you read scouting reports of Ballesteros and when you go back and read Alejandro Kirk's, the one thing that a lot of people said was it's going to take maintenance to last as a major leaguer and, hold up, especially to the toil of catching. And I don't know if that's specifically been the issue for Kirk, but when you look at that comp, Kirk came out really, really good at the major league level, but it just proved unsustainable. And so that's the concern with Ballesteros. But, you asked me who we should talk about, and I looked up, some minor league leaderboards and realized he's already at AAA he has not turned 20. He doesn't turn 21 until after the season. So moving that quickly as a catcher says something about how advanced the bat is. He's holding his own at AAA again as a 20-year-old, one of the youngest players at that level. And you look at the Cubs, and catcher's a weak spot on the roster. I mean, they're playing Tomas Nido there. Miguel Amaya is the backup. So I wouldn't be totally shocked if we saw Ballesteros at the major league level this season.
Yeah, it could be one of those situations where he comes up in September, just gets a cup of tea, and then maybe he's on the opening day roster for next season just to get him, a couple at bats and see what he can do. But yeah, it's very impressive what he's done again at his age of 20, already getting the call up to AAA. Again, that was Moises Ballesteros of the Chicago Cubs. If you want to read more about prospects, make sure to check out Scott's latest prospect report, which is live on the site, cbssports.com/fantasy/baseball. Thanks again to Hyundai for sponsoring this segment and the show. Learn more at HyundaiUSA.com. Quick reminders to make sure to download and follow our 5-minute podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, wherever you listen to podcasts, and that we will have a bonus prospect episode coming out every Saturday of the season. Also, just wanted to give people a heads up on the programming schedule for the next week, because obviously the All-Star break is coming, so we don't have any live games to talk about, but we will still have a daily podcast for you coming next week. We'll do things a little bit differently. Sunday night, that will actually be normal. Weekend recap will be live here on YouTube. On Monday, I will record an MLB draft recap with our buddy, the Welsh. That's right. It's been a while. Happy to get him back in the mix. And some very early first-year player draft rankings just to get your mind thinking about Dynasty for next season on Tuesday.
Although, think back to last year, Wyatt Langford.
Paul Skenes.
Two of the top 3 picks made the majors. And this year, I don't know if you've seen what Charlie Condon has done at Georgia. He might not be the number 1 pick, but 37 homers in 60 games with this is an extremely fun draft class if you haven't been following. Jack Castiglione, I think is how you pronounce his name.
I've heard of that guy.
2-way player for the Gators who hit a bunch of homers and throws like 98 from the left side of the mound. The kid from Oregon State, Kazano. This is a pretty fun draft class. A lot of really interesting college players. So could be guys who make an impact at the majors very, very soon.
How about this? I've seen these Wake Forest names. They have like 3 dudes that can be drafted in the first round, right?
Yeah, I think one of the starting pitchers might be a top 5 pick, right?
Yeah, they have. I'm looking at the latest mock draft from MLB.com. 2 Wake Forest players going in the top 4 picks.
Wow.
That is insane. So
I hope Wake Forest did well this year. I know nothing about it.
I do not have the wherewithal to follow college baseball, so I have no idea what has happened. But that will be on Monday. The Welsh and I will be recording that. That will come out on Tuesday as a podcast. Speaking of Tuesday, we will be live on CBS Sports Network with an All-Star Game special. That will be at noon Eastern time. And again, you can watch that on the CBS Sports app or on your cable provider. On Wednesday, we will record a redraft of the first 2 rounds. And on Thursday, we will preview the following week of action. And then boom, Friday, live games are back and the second half of the season is here.
You know, when you put it that way, I thought the break was going to be longer.
There is no break for us, Chris.
I know.
We'll take a break right now. We'll take our first break. When we return, we'll get into the news and notes right after this. Welcome back in. News and notes. Yordan Alvarez was not in the lineup Thursday due to right hip tightness. And it sounds like they're just playing it safe, obviously just ahead of the All-Star break here. Kyle Tucker played catch on the field before Thursday's game, the first time he's done any sort of work on field since going on the IL in early June. Chris, I know that they have listed this as a shin contusion. There had to be some kind of stress fracture. I don't know, hairline fracture, something. The fact that this happened in early June and it's mid-July and Kyle Tucker's just getting back on the field.
I mean, you remember back to it. This was originally like, yeah, he's not going to go on the IL. He's just going to miss a few days. And it's a month later. Yeah, it's weird.
I remember watching it when it happened and he was in some serious pain.
Mm-hmm.
I think I remember hearing that he had done a similar thing earlier in the week where he fouled the ball off his shin and then did the same thing a couple of days later. So yeah, wouldn't surprise me if there's a little bit more something else going on there with Kyle Tucker. Zach Wheeler will not start Sunday against the A's. His MRI came back clean, but the Phillies have opted to play it safe, which obviously makes a ton of sense. Bryce Harper was back in the lineup after missing Wednesday with a bruised left hand. Cody Bellinger was placed in the IL with a fracture in his left middle finger. Chris, did you see anything on a timeline here? Because I did not.
I have not seen. I would expect it's going to be at least a couple of weeks. And you know, one thing that I've seen a couple of reporters talking about is just this really complicates the Cubs trade deadline plans because I don't think he was likely to move, but it was certainly possible given the Cubs seemingly going nowhere fast and him holding an opt-out for next season. I have frankly no idea if he would even take that opt-out at this point because I think he still has 2 years and $50 million left on the deal, but yeah, I would guess we don't see him until August.
The Cubs are currently 3 games out of the wild card spot. I'm telling you, this NL wild card is going to be crazy down to the end. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's everyone but the Rockies and Marlins, right? That's in it, and the Nationals, I guess.
Nationals are 6 games out.
Yeah, they're out of it.
They're starting to fade. But yeah, you have 6 teams that are within 3 games of the wild card, and then obviously the 3 teams that are in the wild card right now: the Braves, the Cardinals, and the Mets. The power of Grimace, man. The season was over back in June, and now they're in a wild card spot. It's crazy. Devin Williams will begin a rehab assignment with High A on Saturday. He's 67% rostered again. Reminder, go out and pick Devin Williams up if you do have a roster spot available. Jose Altuve announced that he will not participate in the All-Star game in order to rest a sore left hand. Bo Bichette was diagnosed with a fascia strain in his right calf and was out of the lineup on Thursday. This is the same calf that forced him on the IL last month. And
it sounds like it might this time as well. They haven't made that decision yet.
It just feels like every year, Chris, there are a few players that just injury just takes away the entire season. And I don't know if it's been that case, but it sure seems like it. It wouldn't surprise me if he's been playing through this for some time. O'Neal Cruz was back in the lineup after sitting out 2 games with hamstring soreness. Tommy Edman was scratched from Thursday's rehab start with, quote, general soreness, hopefully not in his wrist. Tyler Soderstrom was placed on the IL with a left wrist bone bruise. Jordan Montgomery could be back, ready to return from the IL immediately following the All-Star break. D-backs manager Torey Lovullo confirmed that prospect Gilbert Diaz will make another turn in the rotation Saturday following his quality start earlier in the week. And I did want to quickly run through the home run derby, Chris, and there are some new rules this year, and we'll talk about, the field, and we'll get your guess on who you think could win this thing. But yeah, they're changing it up. Instead of a head-to-head format in the first round of the home run derby, it's free play, meaning all 8 of the hitters get their chance to hit home runs, with the 4 best scorers moving on to the semifinal round. And then in the semifinals, it will be a head-to-head format based on how many home runs were hit in the first round. So whoever hit the most home runs will face whoever hit the 4th most, so on and so forth. Each round is still timed. However, you have 3 minutes with a max of 40 pitches. So they wanted to slow the pace down a little bit. They wanted to have pitchers and hitters focus more on efficiency here. I think that timer drops down to 2 minutes with 27 total pitches in the final round of the home run derby. And after 3 minutes or 40 pitches, a hitter gets a bonus round. In previous years, the bonus was 30 seconds with a chance at another 30 seconds. This year, the bonus round is 3 outs. So anything hit that's not a home run, and you can earn a 4th out if you hit a home run of at least 425 feet in the bonus round. So some different changes here. I think overall I like them, and it'll work out here. The home run derby is obviously a ton of fun and looking forward to it. The participants: Gunnar Henderson, Pete Alonso, Alec Boehm, Bobby Witt Jr., Marcell Ozuna, Jose Ramirez, Teoscar Hernandez, and representing the home field, home ballpark, Adolis Garcia. Chris, who are you taking in the home run derby?
I mean, you got to go with one of the greatest home run derby contestants of all time, right? I know it's the boring pick, and like people don't like Pete Alonso for some reason. I don't really understand it. He seems to be relatively unpopular among a lot of baseball fans. I don't really get it, but like he's proven he has this event locked in. So I'm going to go with him. Alec Boehm, I think, is going to lead the competition in doubles off the right field wall.
Wow, I thought we were Phillies homers, Chris. Come on.
And I will say, Jose Ramirez, dark horse. I love the bat control guys. I just wonder if, like, one, is he going to hit a 425-foot home run? That might be asking a lot. He's not a guy who really crushes them. But he's so consistent with that stroke to right field that I could see Jose Ramirez making a run here.
I am Scott, by the way. I texted him asking for a pick. He also said Pete Alonso. So wanted to get that out there on record. I'm going with Marcell Ozuna, man. I think he is built for something like this. He's having a monster year. The barrels, he hits the ball hard. No problem getting to the 425-foot home run. I think Adolis Garcia could perform well also. Yeah. But I'm going to go with Marcell Ozuna. I think he gets it done. Let's talk rankings, risers, and fallers. We each updated our rankings earlier in the week. And Chris, I'll throw it over to you. I know you just released your newsletter with a bunch of these risers and fallers. Mm-hmm. So who you got?
Yeah, I put a bunch of them in the notes, but I'll focus on one. Ben Rice. I moved him up to my number 11 catcher. And, you know, when you look at like the overall rankings, it's still like in the 190 range. So I'm not, if you look at where he is at first base, it looks pretty underwhelming, but the catcher position is just, it's still not great, even though I actually do feel like there are a decent number of useful options, but in terms of difference makers, it's still very light. So it was fairly easy to move Ben Rice up. And yeah, you and I have him 11, or no, Scott and I have him 11th. You hate the Yankees, obviously, so you've got him 13th. And I think that swing and that approach is really well suited to Yankee Stadium. I think there's a decent chance that Anthony Rizzo just got Wally pipped. And I love that he's moving up in the lineup. He's batted leadoff a few times. He's batted cleanup a few times. That seems like a good sign for Ben Rice, if not such a good sign for the New York Yankees.
I do wonder one thing: if Anthony Rizzo comes back and shows any signs of life, if they can even find a way to get him in the lineup, do they give Ben Rice a shot at catcher? Because I think that's possible.
He's played one inning.
Yeah, he hasn't really played there yet. I mean, that was his main position in the minors. The Yankees clearly have not gotten much from their catchers this year with Austin Wells and Jose Trevino. Trevino defensively, I mean, everybody is running against him this season. Yeah. So I won't rule it out. I think it's a possibility, and I actually think that would be better because then we could have Ben Rice with catcher eligibility for next season.
Next year, yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of just hope that happens.
But I will say, like, there's at least a chance that this is just one of those late bloomers that slip through the cracks in the prospect, industrial complex and ends up being, even if he's just a first baseman, ends up being a Jake Cronenworth type, which would be still useful if he's only first base next season. But obviously, we would love to see him get 9 more appearances at catcher.
100%. Any other names you want to highlight from the risers and fallers?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about Mark Vientos, and I moved him up to 17 at third base, which at least last time we talked about it yesterday.
Yep.
That was the highest among us. Yeah, you and Scott have him outside of the top 20, but with Rengifo's injury and Morel struggling and a lot of guys just, I think Joey Ortiz is hurt right now. I do think what Mark Vientos has shown is worth ranking as a top 20 third baseman. It's not the best position in fantasy anyway, so I'll be a little aggressive with him. And then Anthony Volpe down to shortstop 16. He was also in the bus column for the second half that I wrote today that will be up on cbssports.com on Friday afternoon or Friday morning, hopefully. I think there's a decent chance now that he's pretty firmly out of the leadoff spot. I think there's a decent chance we end up dropping Anthony Volpe in a lot of leagues. He's just been, I mean, the OPS I think is down below 700 now for the season.
He's been bad. There's no doubt.
He's been bad like almost the whole season.
I think the Yankees don't have a stolen base in like their last 20 games or something crazy like that.
That's wild. But at least when he was hitting leadoff consistently, there was still volume. He was still getting runs, but he's been moved out of that spot. I don't think he's batted leadoff in like 8 or 9 games, right?
Yeah, it's consistently 6th or 7th.
And he had the first 2 weeks that were awesome. He's been like a 620 OPS bat since then. I just don't think he makes enough contact to be as punchless as he is right now. And I don't know what the answer is moving forward. So, yeah, Anthony Volpe, I think there's a decent chance that he's dropped in a lot of leagues.
I did want to highlight one that you had on here, Xander Bogaerts, who is getting ready to return maybe as soon as this weekend or right after the All-Star break. You moved him up to your 12th ranked second baseman. He does have second base and shortstop eligibility. I moved him up. I moved him up to like 27. I guess I need to get him higher. It's just,
well, part of it is there are like the second base position we thought was pretty deep coming into the season, but a lot of that depth has been really disappointing so far this season. So like I moved Nolan Gorman down. I moved Jose Caballero down. His playing time has really taken a hit. Andres Jimenez, I finally moved way down. Bryson Stott moved down a little bit, although he's still a little bit ahead of Xander Bogaerts. But yeah, it was just as much me moving Xander Bogaerts up as moving everyone else down. And the big thing with Xander Bogaerts is I know a lot of people are down on him. This is a guy who throughout his career has pretty consistently been one of the biggest overperformers of his expected stats. That was true in Boston, obviously, which we, know for good reason why, but it was also true last year in San Diego. He had a 790 OPS. He hit 285. He stole 19 bases, hit 19 homers. I just think he's a rock solid fantasy option who he's back tomorrow, right? Or today as we're talking.
Yeah, I believe so.
So yeah, I don't think he's a superstar anymore, but I think Xander Bogaerts is going to be a rock solid must start fantasy option moving forward.
All right. A few that I'm going to highlight here. Ryan McMahon. I moved up to my 13th ranked second baseman, my 14th ranked third baseman. And it's not that he's had a huge breakout season. It's just in a year where offense has been down and hard to come by, he has just been rock solid. Kind of in that way that you were just talking about with Xander Bogaerts. McMahon, 76th overall in Roto, 274 batting average, 14 home runs. Counting stats have been good. He's chipped in 3 steals. The expected stats are solid. The StatCast data for Ryan McMahon, 94 mile per hour average exit velocity. That is in the 97th percentile, and a 12.4% barrel rate. That is in the 85th percentile. So I think at the end of season, we're looking at 25 to 30 home runs, a handful of steals, good counting stats with a solid batting average. That's a really useful player. So just thought I would give Ryan McMahon some credit here for what he's done. Christian Yelich and Jarren Duran, I have followed suit with you, Chris. I know that you moved Yelich up. I moved both Yelich and Duran ahead of Corbin Carroll and Julio Rodriguez. Now, I might regret saying that, but it's not even so much that I think Julio's just going to be like, this is Julio, this is who he is now, like whatever. It's just giving credit to those guys for being otherworldly and having these, Yelich, we've seen do this before, but Jarren Duran, I mean, a true breakout season. So, getting those guys inside my top 10 outfielders. Byron Buxton has been on fire over the past month. I moved him back inside of my top 50 outfielders in both formats, both roto head-to-head points. Taj Bradley has been really good for quite some time now. And we talk about that SP 30 to 60 range is very fluid. I've moved Taj Bradley up to SP 43 and the opposite, Carlos Yordan, all the way down to SP 61. So
yeah, I didn't move Rodon down enough in my most recent update. And I realized like we're talking about several hundred players here. So, I'll get comments that are like, how could you have this player? And it's just like, yeah, I overlooked it. And so I think Rodon, I'm not going to move him quite as far down because I still don't understand why his fastball has been so bad. And I still think there's a fairly obvious path back to decent fantasy production, but both him and Kevin Gausman, I think, are in a very similar spot. And I've grouped them together the last couple of weeks before where it's just, I think they'll be better than they have been. I don't think those guys are getting back to it.
Fair enough. Let's get back into Thursday's action and the waiver wire pitchers that stood out. Brandon Pfaadt was great up against the Braves. He threw 6 shutout innings with 4 strikeouts. Velocity was up across the board between 1.2 and 1.9 miles per hour on each of the fastball, sinker, and sweeper. David Peterson was great up against the Nationals. He threw 6 shutout innings with 5 strikeouts. He had 12 whiffs on 102 pitches. And Aaron Savali pitched well up against the Pirates. 6 1/3, 1 run allowed, 6 strikeouts. I saw Lance Brazdowski tweeting about this earlier. The fact that Savali has changed his pitch mix since joining the Brewers. He's ditched his 4-seam fastball. He's throwing more sinkers. He's throwing more sweepers. And it looks like that could be a recipe for success. What does success look like for Savali? We're probably talking about him in the same light as like Jamison Tyone and Jose Quintana, the way those guys have pitched. Maybe a little bit more upside because I think there's a little bit more strikeout, potential there with someone like Savali. But Chris, any enthusiasm? Are you looking to add any of Pfaadt, Peterson, or Savali where they could be available?
Enthusiasm is not the word I would use for any of these guys. Like I write a waiver wire section of the newsletter, and Savali and Pfaadt are in there, but Pfaadt is 72% rostered. That feels right for a guy who, in a roto league or a categories league especially, but any season-long format really, I think is the way to think about it. There are still going to be those blow-up starts that I think are going to keep the ratios inflated. But when you look at it from a weekly or a points league perspective, how deep he's pitching into his games consistently this season, that's a real boon for his value in those head-to-head points leagues especially. So if there are any head-to-head points leagues where Brandon Pfaadt's available, I think that's a worthwhile add. I have very little interest in David Peterson. I added him to the waiver wire section of the newsletter as I was planning it out. And then I was just like, I can't actually make an affirmative case for this. He faced the Nationals, who I think are bottom 3 in WOBA against lefties. We expected him to have a good start. We're happy he did. I'm not going to chase that one.
How would you rank these 4 young pitchers that we have varying levels of excitement for? Shane Baz, Gavin Williams, Reese Olson, Brandon Pfaadt.
Rank those 4, right? Okay. It's Baz. Sorry, who was the second one?
Gavin Williams.
Baz, Williams.
Reese Olson and Brandon Pfaadt.
Boz, Williams, Olsen, Fott. That's the order that you presented them in. That's the order that I would go with.
That is the same order that I would say as well. Let's take our final break, and when we return, we will get into the waiver wire hitters right after this.
Well, you need your sports news anywhere?
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
Welcome back in. Let's talk waiver wire hitters. And in the shallowest of leagues, JD Martinez could still be out there. He's 76% rostered, 3 for 3 with a double and 2 runs. He is up to a 274 batting average. He has 10 homers and 832 OPS in 63 games this week. Chris, which Met hitter would you rather have? JD Martinez or Mark Vientos?
I think they're probably pretty similar. I think Martinez probably has a little less volatility, but the fact that he's only DH eligible, I think, is enough to give Vientos the edge. But in a vacuum, I think it's very close. I think Martinez is probably the better hitter, but Vientos probably has a little more upside.
Yeah, I think it's just the mystery box, right? Is there a chance that Vientos could be better than JD Martinez? Of course, there's a chance. I think I would lean with the consistency of JD Martinez. It is very close, but yeah, just if you're looking for a hitter, that will contribute right away. I think both of those will, but I lean ever so slightly with JD Martinez. Some names that we've talked about all week, they continue to hit. They've all had good weeks. Masataka Yoshida, 3 for 4 with his 4th home run, 4 RBI. Last 10 games, he is batting .350 with 2 homers and 11 RBI. Brandon Marsh, 2 for 4 with a triple and his 9th home run. In those 3 games against the Dodgers, 5 hits, 2 homers, 6 runs scored, 1 steal for Brandon Marsh. Michael Busch continues to hit as well, 2 for 4 with 2 doubles, a walk, 3 runs, and 2 RBI. His last 4 games, he has 9 hits, 2 home runs, 7 runs, and 6 RBI. So all 3 of these are hot. Let's say you don't have a position of need. Chris, how would you rank just the priority of adding any of Busch, Yoshida, Brandon Marsh?
It would be Busch, Yoshida, and Marsh for me, I think. But I do think there's a drop-off after Busch because Marsh, questionable if he's useful, outside of he's useful, but I think the better format for him is daily. I still don't buy him against lefties. Yoshida, it's interesting. We talk about inconsistent or streaky hitters, and we tend to talk about these big free swingers, but you think about the beginning of last season to now, Masataka Yoshida and Alex Verdugo have incredibly similar profiles and have been as streaky as anyone. Yoshida gets really, really hot and gets ice cold just as quickly. I think that's very interesting. I'm not sure exactly what to make of it. But when he's doing well, I think it's worth looking at Masataka Yoshida in, deeper categories leagues, some points leagues. What's interesting about today, his hardest hit ball was his only out. He had a 108-mile-an-hour line drive that had a .630 expected batting average. That was an out. His home run had an XBA of about .230. So always love when that happens. But yeah, I would go with Busch, who I think his consistency is going to be a big problem with how much he strikes out. But man, when he gets hot, he apparently gets really, really hot because his OPS has gone up 90 points in the past 10 games for the season.
Wow.
Yeah, he got down to 766. No, he got down to 790 11 games ago. He's up to 853. So it's gone up 63 points in the past 11 games.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Who would you rather have between Vientos and Michael Busch?
Vientos, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Some other potential adds. Tyler Stevenson has been slugging lately. 2 for 5 with a double dong, 5 RBI. He has 4 home runs over his last 3 games. And Chris, in a 1-catcher league, would you drop a slumping David Fry or a slumping Ryan Jeffers to grab the hot hand of Tyler Stevenson?
Yeah, I think unless you have one of the sure things, and I don't know how many sure things we would say there are. Does Francisco Alvarez count as a sure thing?
I think
there are probably 8 sure things. I would go down to Yainer Diaz in my rankings, who's been super hot himself, which helps. anyone outside of that, I think it's okay. Maybe Wilson Contreras counts. I don't know. Anyone outside of that, I think I'd be fine streaming when they're hot or when they're not. So yeah, I think it's fine to go with Tyler Stevenson.
Let's talk about Spencer Horwitz, who continues to hit. He went 2 for 5 with his 4th home run. He is batting .322 with a .435 on base percentage, 4 homers, .935 OPS. He has 14 walks to 15 strikeouts through 29 games. This skill set, Chris, is just made in a lab for a head-to-head points league. It is perfect. The problem is, I was going to say he's sitting out here or there. He has started, it looks like, 12 of the past 13 games. So the playing time is trending up. He just seems like a perfect fit in a points league.
Yeah, points or obviously an OBP league. If he's out there in any of those, I think he's a very useful option, especially like having that positional versatility. You're going to use him more often as a second baseman than a first baseman, but it's nice to have a guy you can move into different spots in your lineup based on injuries or matchups. So, yeah.
This is one that I've struggled with, and they have very similar position eligibility. Spencer Horwitz or Colt Keith.
Yeah, so Keith is second and third. Horwitz is first and second. Obviously, third is a little harder to fill than, a little easier. Sorry, a little harder to fill than first base. So if there's any kind of gap there, but I think that one might actually just come down to league type. In a traditional roto, I think Colt Keith's a better bet for power and speed, but Spencer Horwitz has an edge in any OBP league.
Last name I wanted to highlight was Brandon Lau, who has low-key been solid since returning from the IL back in May. In 38 games since returning, a .260 batting average, 7 homers, 21 runs, 22 RBI. He's 60% rostered. I think that's right. I don't know that needs to be higher. He still sits here and there, which is annoying. He's played 7 of the past 10 games. And
I don't know how much value he has in a points league. That's the problem.
I don't think that's going away either. He started against a lefty here on Thursday against Nestor Cortez. I think it's almost more of like a maintenance thing, like trying to keep him healthy and on the field. So
I do wonder if there's like, if the Rays continue to slip, would they consider moving him? I mean, anyone making more than what's the major league minimum? 700,000 now. Anyone making a penny more than that is always a candidate to be traded by the Rays. So, that might be a situation where he's better off getting traded. I was shocked to see his OPS is up to 814 for the season. I didn't realize that he was up there. So that's a good sign. But yeah, I think 60% rostered, that's probably close to the ceiling unless he starts playing every day.
All right, some names in deeper leagues. Michael Toglia has been hitting for power since he got recalled. 33 games, only a .219 batting average, but 8 home runs, 21 RBI, and 3 steals. He's hitting the ball hard, lots of barrels as well. Austin Wells has been hitting better as of late. Last 10 games, batting .286 with 3 home runs. And the legend of Rhys Hind continues. 2 for 4 with a double and his second stolen base. First 4 career games, he is 8 for 16 with 2 homers, 2 steals. He also has 5 strikeouts to 0 walks. So
look,
see where it goes.
It's 16 plate appearances. If he could strike out 5 times every 16 plate appearances, I'm going to do a little top of the head math. That sounds like
right around
29%, 30%. Okay.
30%. Yeah. Something around there.
Like that, he might have the kind of power where if he strikes out 30% of the time, he's fantasy relevant. It's just kind of similar to Matt Wallner, where historically, like Rhys Hind was striking out 38% of the time at AAA. I'm stunned he got called up. I looked into the trends. It's not like the strikeout rate was trending down.
I think they're just desperate for bodies right now. That's what it is.
So it feels like, let's see if I can get this one right. Aristides Aquino, because I did the same thing that Scott did the other day and said Aristides Caminero, not different guy. Remember he had, I don't know, 8 homers in his first 20 games or whatever it was. He was one of the biggest flashes of that season and, basically hasn't done anything since then. So I think that's the likeliest outcome, but Rhys Hind does have an outlier skill in power. And so if he can just be bad at making contact, he might matter for fantasy.
Yeah. Instead of an atrocity, like 40.
Right. Like that's the thing is 31% versus 36%. One might be playable. One is a trip back to AAA.
I mean, that's what we used to say about Joey Gallo, right? I mean, he was in the mid 30s in strikeout rate. And, at the time when he was still playing and still good, that was when Aaron Judge got called up and Judge was right around 30%. And you're looking at it and you're saying, well, hey, this is the difference, man. 5-6 percentage points in strikeout rate.
Yeah.
Once you're approaching the mid 30s or even 40%, it's untenable. So
you look at Efraimo Reyes is similar, Joey Gallo, like you mentioned, like that margin for error is real slim.
Yeah.
But if he can be on the right side, I do think in 5 outfielder leagues, Rhys Hines can matter. So I think it's fine to go out and add him just in case.
Let's get into some of the leftovers from Thursday. And are you buying into the last 2 outings from these 2 pitchers? Kevin Gausman makes it 2 strong starts in a row following those mechanical tweaks. He was at the Giants, 7 innings, 2 runs, only 3 strikeouts, only 7 whiffs on 98 pitches. I still would like to see the splitter work. It doesn't seem like it's been working, but the last 2 starts, the results are there. And Luis Castillo, a great start at the Angels. He threw 6 shutout innings, 5 strikeouts. And I noticed his slider is completely different. The velocity is down 3.4 miles per hour. It had 8 more inches of vertical break. And after his last start, Luis Castillo acknowledged that this is a new slider grip that he's working with. Here was the quote after his previous start. Quote, "It gives me 3 different varieties of speed to play with the batter, but I think this with this new one and the old one that I have, we can do a little mix and match on it." So a new look for Castillo. He's been very good over his last 2 starts. Chris, are you buying back in Gausman or Castillo? Not that you've ever been out, but what do you think?
I'm mostly out on Gausman in terms of, do I expect him to be an ace? I don't. I would be very, very surprised if Kevin Gausman went on a run the next 3 months where he looks like an ace. I don't think that's there. The splitter just has not been there at any point this season, really. And that's the biggest thing for him because he relies on that pitch so much. Maybe he'll get there, but at this point, I'm viewing him and Carlos Rodon very similarly, like I said earlier, where there will be good starts. There will be bad starts. On the whole, I think they'll be useful. But you can sit Kevin Gausman against bad matchups. That's not something I would have said before. And it's notably not something I would say about Luis Castillo. I do want to make that point that, Castillo getting the 9 whiffs with the 4-seam fastball, I think that's a great sign because he's one of those guys that really relies on the 4-seamer for whiffs. He was a 33% whiff rate with it last season. If he can get back to that, yeah, I do expect Luis Castillo to be a must-start pitcher moving forward.
How do you rank these 4 pitchers? I think they're all in a similar range, and they all pitched really well here on Thursday. We already spoke about Hunter Greene. Jack Flaherty looked great in his return to the mound up against the Guardians. 6 innings, 1 run, 4 strikeouts. He had 11 whiffs on 83 pitches. Justin Steele continues his hot stretch. This time at the Orioles, he threw 7 shutout innings with 4 strikeouts. Kind of interesting that he only threw 70 pitches. I mean, he was incredibly efficient. Feels like he could have gone longer in the start if they wanted him to. And Tanner Houck bounced back with a great start up against Oakland. 6 shutout innings with 6 strikeouts, 11 whiffs on 103 pitches. You can touch on all these pitchers, Chris, but your thoughts and how do you rank those 4?
Ooh, okay. How do I rank them? I think it's Steele, Greene, Flaherty. I think Houck is 4th, but I like all of them. I think they're all top 36 pitchers for me, if I'm remembering correctly. Flaherty, I think obviously it was just good to see him bounce back from that back injury and look good. The 4 strikeouts a little disappointing until you remember it's Cleveland. That's fine against a team that strikes out a little bit more. I think you'd expect more, but the stuff looked good after the back injury. Hopefully he puts that behind him, but obviously I think there is some risk moving forward. If you wanted to view Jack Flaherty as a sell high candidate, I think that's reasonable coming out of this given the back injury. But other than that, I think he'll be good. The interesting thing here was how few sinkers he threw. And he's been, like every Red Sox pitcher, he's been fading his fastballs. He threw it 22% of the time in this one. And the one thing I will say is while he got 11 whiffs with the slider and splitter, he's a slider guy, not a sweeper guy. I do wonder if there is a point of diminishing returns there with the 3 walks. Like, can he consistently pitch deep into games, generate weak contact, and avoid walks without throwing the sinker that much? I would guess not, and he probably needs to be more in the 30+% range, but I still mostly buy everything that we've seen from Tanner Houck. Not a sub 3 ERA necessarily, but very, very solid low threes. That being said, already a career high innings at the major league level. So it is, fair to wonder how he's going to hold up in the second half. That's the only question I have, really.
And again, that was Tanner Houck. Let's get into the rest of the pitching leftovers. Aaron Nola turned in a quality start up against the Dodgers. 6 innings, 1 run, 9 strikeouts, 16 whiffs on 101 pitches. He was awesome in this start. Max Fried, a quality start at the D-backs. 6 innings, 1 run, had 7 strikeouts, 12 whiffs on 108 pitches. And Shane Baz was not great in his second start up against the Yankees. 4 1/3, 3 runs allowed, 5 strikeouts, 2 homers allowed. I was watching this game. He gave up some really loud contact, 9 hard hits, 93.6 average exit velocity. I think it's fair. It's going to take a little bit of time. He hasn't pitched in the majors since 2022. Again, that is Shane Baz. But Chris, any thoughts on him, Fried, and Aaron Nola?
Nola, the strikeouts are coming back as the season has gone on. Remember early in the season, we were talking about how weird it's been that he's been so good while the strikeout rate was a career low. It's getting back closer to where it was last season, and notably not struggling like he did last season. So I think that's a good sign. Feel great about him moving forward. Feel great about Max Fried.
Even year, Chris. Even year, Nola.
Even year, Aaron Nola. Don't draft him next year. I don't really believe that, but yeah, it's the trend. Shane Baz, the curveball's not there. He threw it, I think, 6 times or maybe 8 times, something like that, and didn't get a whiff with it, or maybe got 1 whiff. It's just, he's not quite there. The slider only generated 2 whiffs today. And so I just think he's still figuring it out, and that's fine. Shane Baz was one of my second half breakouts. I feel very good about him moving forward, but the curveball has not really been there, even in the minor league rehab assignment. And I think he's going to keep searching for it until he finds it. Once he does, I think he could really take off, but just patience. There's a lot of upside with Shane Baz. I would hang on to him, even coming off of a pretty disappointing start.
Yeah, and I agree with that completely. Some hitting leftovers. Elliot Ramos continues to hit 1 for 4 with his 14th home run, 2 RBI. Trey Turner has been on fire since returning, 2 for 4 with a sock and a shoe, his 9th home run, his 12th steal. Good to see him running because while he's been great, he's hitting for batting average, he's hitting for power. He hasn't run much since coming back from a hamstring injury. So obviously we'd like to see him run and make sure that that hamstring is actually healthy. But obviously he's done everything else. He looks great. Seiya Suzuki has been racking up the power and speed lately. 3 for 5 with 2 doubles, a triple, 3 RBI. Over his last 18 games, he has 4 homers, 3 steals, 15 RBI. Again, that was Seiya Suzuki. Juan Soto looking to get back on track. 2 for 3 with 2 walks and his 22nd home run. And over his last 14 games, Soto is only batting .250, but he also has 4 home runs. 93.6 average exit velocity, an 18% barrel rate. Some people have tweeted and emailed.
Yeah.
Juan Soto is back. He's also playing through a hand injury, which they have acknowledged multiple times now.
I will say, I saw someone tweeted at us. It was something about like, he's been struggling since the hand injury. Or, yeah, it was the hand injury, right?
It was a forearm before.
Forearm, that was
all
what
got scared about. But then now he's also kind of dealing with a hand injury on top of that. So
the struggling since the hand injury or the forearm injury was like an 840 OPS with a 240 BABIP. He's still hitting for power. He's still walking. He's not striking out very much. Like players just, their production fluctuates, and we don't need to panic every time a guy fluctuates. We don't need to freak out every time the fluctuation happens on the positive side. Slow and steady wins the race, or at least gets you to the end without, coronary.
And someone who might be on that upswing, starting to pick things up, Randy Arozarena has looked much better over the last month. Last 22 games, he's batting .291 with 4 homers, 11 runs, 11 RBI, 5 steals, hitting the ball hard, lots of barrels during that stretch. Some bullpen updates for the Pirates. Aroldis Chapman got the 9th inning with a 1-run lead. He struck out 1 for his 4th save. For the Blue Jays, Chad Greene got the 9th with a 3-run lead. He gave up a solo homer, but picked up his 5th save. For the Phillies, Jeff Hoffman entered in the 8th inning with a 3-run lead. So they were going back to Hoffman in the 8th, Alvarado in the 9th. He was facing the heart of the Dodgers lineup. So maybe that's telling here with Hoffman. Maybe he's climbed to the top of the ladder in terms of, facing the toughest parts of an opposing lineup.
Alvarado faced 3, 4, 5 literally the night before. So I don't know how much I want to take from that. I think it's just.
Is there any rhyme or reason?
So the only thing I would say is yesterday he faced Alvarado. They had 2 lefties coming up. I think it was Freeman and Pajes were 3 and 5.
Today, it could be as simple as that,
yeah. Today I think it was the first 3 batters. 2 of them were righties. So, but look, what we said, I think on yesterday's podcast was that we don't think Hoffman's just running away with it, that it's probably 50-50 moving forward. And that would lead to some nights like this.
Yeah. By the way, the Phillies tacked on another run in the bottom of the 8th, and then Alvarado came in. He pitched the 9th inning, but it wasn't a save opportunity at that point. For the Rays, Pete Fairbanks got the 9th inning with a 2-run lead. He gave up 1 run on 2 walks and a hit, but picked up his 16th save. For the Astros, Josh Hader struck out 2 for his 17th save. And for the D-backs, Paul Sewald got the 9th inning with a 1-run lead. He gave up a hit, but picked up his 13th save.
That was real close, though.
Kind of fortunate because he gave up a very long fly ball to Matt Olson.
I don't know if it was going out.
It was right at the top of the
They
wall.
didn't really give a good angle on the replay, but yeah, it was real close to a home run to tie the game.
Yeah, caught by Jake McCarthy. Shout out to Jake McCarthy. His walk-up song is Kurt Angle's theme song from wrestling back in the day. It's
incredible.
Every time I tune into a D-backs game, I find it hilarious, so I love it. To stream or not to stream on Friday, some options here. We have Sean Manaea facing the Rockies in New York. Carson Spires facing the Marlins. Spencer Schwellenbach at the Padres. Yariel Rodriguez at the D-backs. And I think those are the main 4.
Yeah, I wish Schwellenbach had a better matchup. The Padres are the, I believe, least strikeout prone team in the majors. Heaney, another one I wish had a better matchup. So I would probably, if I had to pick, lean Manaea, and I think Manaea is probably my favorite.
I think so too. I would go Manaea, Schwellenbach, and then Spires.
Yeah, that's fine.
On Saturday, there are a few options here. Luis Ortiz has actually pitched well for the Pirates. He's at the White Sox. That is a great matchup. We have Christian Scott, who's facing the Rockies in New York. Mitchell Parker at the Brewers. He's looked pretty good recently. And, Kyle Gibson up against the Cubs is fine. Jose Soriano up against the Mariners. Good matchup. Who are your 2 or 3 favorites from Saturday?
Christian Scott versus Colorado. I know he's been a little disappointing, but I still have pretty high expectations for him, or at least high hopes, maybe is the better way to put it. And that's a great matchup. Ortiz, I don't mind against the White Sox. I don't mind Soriano versus Seattle as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I would probably go Scott, Ortiz, and I'll go with Mitchell Parker. I like what we've seen from him.
Sure.
On Sunday, we have...
I think we're out on Dean Kramer.
Yeah, Dean Kramer up against the Yankees.
No.
We have Jose Quintana, who gets
against the Rockies at home. That's fine.
New York, that's fine. Alan Ray gets the Nationals. It's okay. Jameson Tyone has pitched well. He's up.
Yeah, Tyone against the Cardinals is fine.
Michaelis on the other side.
Michaelis versus the Cubs is okay.
I think Quintana and Tyone are.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Well, that's it for us in the first half of the season. We will see you here on Sunday to recap the weekend, and then we go into the All-Star break. But we are going to wrap there. For Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, and we will be back again next week. Bye-bye.